Good morning, all of you. Welcome to Ansarkari. So in this video, let us start with the analysis for 28th of April 2023. So first of all, ties depend on peace on the border. So this is our defense ministers to say to China. And definitely that's very true. So violation of the existing agreements that has eroded the entire basis of bilateral relations between India and China. And this was the first high-level military visit since the Ladakh standoff, which began in 2020. So de-escalation talks, they have been going on since then, but अभी तक हमें ऐसा कोई real results नहीं मिला है of those talks. उसके अलावा यहाँ पे शंघाई कोऑपरेशन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन mentioned है, तो all its members they are important क्या और initiatives हैं जो SCO ने लिए हैं, इसके headquarter कहाँ पे है, that information like very basic, all of us must know about that. And moving on to the next thing, so central government, it de-recognizes two postal unions. So the one is All India Postal Employees Union and the National Federation of Postal Employees for making contributions to the farmers' protest and the center of the Indian trade unions and for buying books from CPIM office in Delhi. So these were the reasons why central government has de-recognized them. So this decision, it was based on the Central Civil Services Recognition of Service Association rules of 1993. And according to it, both of them were de-recognized. So the attack which was there by the Maoists in Dantewada, police say that the IED, it was planted a day or two before, and yesterday we saw कि it was like carrying 50 kg of explosive. So जब blast हुआ तो बहुत बड़ा crater create हो गया, तो that was the impact of it. And in this picture also, this is probably that site only जिसको अब fill कर दिया गया है. So इससे रिगार्डिंग हमने पूरे डिटेल में एनालाइज किया कि छत्तीसगढ़ स्टेट ही क्यों चूज किया गया एंड जो बाकी सराउंडिंग स्टेट्स है वहां पे क्या सिचुएशन है एंड क्या बेसिकली ट्रेंड चला आ रहा है. इसके अलावा जो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट है उन्होंने क्या स्टेप्स लिए एंड सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने कैसे हेल्प किया है. तो ये हमने कल प्रॉपरली डिटेल में विद डेटा वी हैव ऑलरेडी कवर्ड दिस. एंड अगर आपने कल की वीडियो नहीं देखी है तो डू watch that video because the topic is very important. So Jharkhand state mein here you can see air ambulance. So air ambulance seva ka shubharamb, and this is for the first time that Jeevan Raksha ko mili udan. So this is the plane and iske andar ki bhi picture hai and it's the bed. Coming to the editorial page, so here, so not by Vande Bharat alone. So there's a touch of irony in the fact that today most of the news about Indian Railways, it is about Vande Bharat trains. जो भी Indian Railways से related news आती है, it is regarding that, and more particularly the fact that every new Vande Bharat train is being personally flagged off by the Prime Minister. So for a little over 4 years, 4 साल हो चुके हैं that launch of train 18. The precursor of the Vande Bharat train, it was heralded by the initiation of the vigilance investigations against some of the top architects of the project on wholly suspicious grounds. So जो train 18 project था, it was before Vande Bharat train से पहले this was there, and it was like one that was wholly conceived, planned and executed with elan in record time by a team of inspired, talented and committed railway professionals of the integrated coach factory Chennai. And even Vande Bharat trains, it's an like example of purely local initiative. And we know ki the trains, they have been indigenously built. So that's one of the best examples of Make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat. But there are some like certain serious issues when we talk about Indian Railways, because abhi major focus Vande Bharat trains pe kiya ja raha hai. So we are missing on what else, like what are the other serious issues which are confronting Indian Railways. So it is important that we pay adequate attention to even them. So we saw कि जो separate railway budget आता था, it has been scrapped and it has been merged with the general budget from 2017 onwards. So 2017 से कोई separate railway budget नहीं आया है and it has been merged with the general budget. So there has been a welcome shift towards ramping up investments in Indian Railways. We have seen key investments, they have been ramped up, they are increasing. As far as Indian Railways is concerned, both through increased budgetary support also and from the general exchequer. And through institutional borrowings also, which are aimed at creating additional rail transport capacity ahead of the demand. So this is one thing that we are trying more of investment, and we are ensuring कि जितनी demand है उससे ज़्यादा capacity हमारे पास हमेशा रहे. So infrastructural development यहाँ पे different तरीके बताए गए हैं कि how basically investments it's like coming into the Indian Railways through different routes. But we need more relevant metrics. So accordingly, annual plan outlay of the Indian Railways, which was around rupees 1,09,000 crores in 2016-17, in the last separate railway budget, it has ballooned to around rupees 2,60,200 crore rupees in the budget this year's union budget. And basically, this is an increase of 137%. Unprecedented levels of investment आई है when we talk about building the railway infrastructure. And main चीज अब ये है कि these investments, they need to translate into concrete progress towards the capacity building. Highlighting only the inputs without looking at the outcomes serves no purpose. So performance of Indian Railways, it needs to be evaluated using more relevant metrics. So here we'll be looking into two main areas. One will be the freight, and second the passenger fronts. So National Rail Plan 2030, it is envisaging raising the rail share and freight traffic vis-a-vis the roadways from 27% to 45% by 2050. So अभी जो railways का freight share है वो बहुत कम है, maximum है that is of the roads. So roads में basically efficiency कम होती है, cost of transportation ज़्यादा लगती है, and it takes like more time in delivering the relevant goods. So इसलिए this is one target कि जो railways का freight share है उसको increase करना है from the current 27% to 45% by 2050. And also another target is raising of the average speed of the goods train to 50 km per hour. Right now the speed is 25 km per hour. And then also concurrent reduction in the tariff rates for the freight by up to 30%. So it may be mentioned कि railways का जो share of freight carried, it reduced from 51%. 2008-9 में 51.5% था, तो it was gradually declining. So it declined to around 32% in 2018-19. And now we have the target कि इसको 27% से 45% तक increase करना है by 2050. And 55% of the increase, when we talk about increase in the volume of the traffic which was carried by the railways, so just 55% increase was from only one commodity, which is coal. So there is no evidence of higher levels of tariffs being achieved concurrently with diversification of commodities carried or an increase in the rail share vis-a-vis the road transport. So we can say कि race towards achieving the targets which are set in this National Rail Plan of 2030, Indian Railways, it is near the starting block. So talking about some other core issues, so passenger front की अगर हम बात करें, perhaps which is the single most important operational index is punctuality. Obviously punctuality यहाँ पे सबसे important and relevant indicator होगा जब हम passengers की बात करते हैं. तो है a radical shift in the emphasis it is called for. So if stations in the Indian Railways networks, they can be remodeled to international standards, perhaps it is time to aim for international standards in punctuality of the trains as well. So यहाँ पे ट्रेन्स में डीले देखा जाता है, तो पैसेंजर फ्रंट पे हमें बोलेंगे कि सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज हमारे लिए ये है कि जो भी स्केड्यूल्ड टाइम्स हैं उसी के अकॉर्डिंग ट्रेन्स दे शुड ऑपरेट. एंड बेसिकली ये बात हो गई कि पंक्चुअलिटी पे हमें और काम करने की जरूरत है. एंड जो भी करंट स्टैंडर्ड्स है, वी नीड टू मूव टुवर्ड्स इंटरनेशनल स्टैंडर्ड्स. सो उसमें सबसे पहली चीज पंक्चुअलिटी ऑफ ट्रेन्स ही आती है. सो अगर हम जापानीज रेलवेज की बात करें, द पंक्चुअलिटी ऑफ देयर हाई स्पीड ट्रेन्स इन सेकेंड्स, it is there in seconds, and the Indian Railways, it should aim to be at least within 5 minutes. So यहाँ पे तो हम 5 minutes की बात कर रहे हैं इंडियन रेलवेज में. जापानीज ट्रेन्स की जो बात है, हाई स्पीड ट्रेन स्पेसिफिकली, इनकी पंक्चुअलिटी बेसिकली सेकंड्स का भी हिसाब रखते कि इस टाइम पे, इस मिनट पे, इस सेकंड पे ट्रेन वुड स्टार्ट. सो यू कैन इमेजिन क्या लेवल ऑफ पंक्चुअलिटी होगा जापानीज ट्रेन की. सो इंडियन रेलवेज में वी आर हियर सीइंग कि हमें यहाँ पे एटलीस्ट इतना तो मेंटेन करना चाहिए, जो भी शेड्यूल टाइम है, मतलब उससे कम या उसके बाद विद इन 5 minutes के ब्रैकेट में वी शुड एम फॉर द पंक्चुअलिटी थिंग फॉर इंडियन रेलवेज. And published statistics of punctuality, usually they are above 90%, and these figures they are arrived at with a dose of adjustment also, they adjusted bhi hai. And अभी सिर्फ हम सिर्फ डेस्टिनेशन अराइवल टाइम कंसिडर करते हैं, irrespective of the fact that a train might have been off schedule en route at all the important intermediate stations. So अगर पहले स्टेशन से ट्रेन लेट स्टार्ट हुई है, तो ऑब्वियसली जो आने वाले बाकी इंटरमीडिएट स्टेशन होंगे बिफोर द डेस्टिनेशन, तो वहां पे भी ट्रेन लेट पहुंचेगी. तो वी आर जस्ट कंसिडरिंग कि डेस्टिनेशन अराइवल टाइम, वॉज ट्रेन ऑन टाइम थी, लेट थी या जल्दी थी. So more than a decade ago, an exercise was undertaken to plot the status of all the passenger trains on the move in the Indian Railways network on real-time basis. So the punctuality of all the passenger carrying trains at any given time hovered around 60%. So ये कम है, मतलब punctuality की बात करें तो only 60%. So it is high time to move away from the traditional concept of destination punctuality and evolve an index of punctuality that will also reflect the punctuality at the select intermediate stations also. And we are aiming for real-time punctuality of 90%. So the focus should be to improve the overall passenger experience and not merely the statistics, क्योंकि statistics को adjust भी किया जा सकता है. So main target या main aim, passenger experience अच्छा रहे, trains needs to be punctual, जो scheduled times है within 5 minutes bracket, they need to start. And we also talked about Japanese example, so we can mention that as well. And एक annual report होना would also help us. So 7 years ago, in the wake of this elimination of separate rail budget, एक article आया 2016 में, it suggested the government should consider tabling annual report on the performance of the railways in the parliament, and on the lines of the annual economic survey. Like annually we have economic survey, which is prepared by the finance ministry ahead of the general budget. Similarly, railways के लिए भी एक annual report होनी चाहिए, which needs to be presented in the budget. So this report, unlike a publicity pamphlet like the Indian Railways yearbook, it should be an internal performance audit that should serve as a valuable resource for the policy makers. So जो main form होना चाहिए of this annual report for the Indian Railways, it needs to be in the form of an internal performance audit, so that ये आगे policy makers को भी help करे and it becomes an important source for them. So no government or organization would willingly submit itself to such a self-analysis in the public domain. So willingly कोई government, कोई organization ये नहीं करना चाहेगी, but with the huge sums which are already invested in the railways and which are proposed to be invested in the future, the nation can ill afford to let the performance of its prime transporter and its largest public undertaking to be judged merely on the basis of the number of Vande Bharat trains which have been introduced, the glitz and the opulence of its remodeled stations, or the record-breaking length of its railway station platforms. So, ये इतने ज़्यादा I would say rational indicators नहीं है when it comes to judging the performance of Indian Railways. अगर आप count करो कितनी वंदे भारत trains हैं, क्या मतलब these stations they are being remodeled, और उससे obviously consumers को कुछ benefit मिलेगा, but that's not the prime indicator we can say. And third यहाँ पे mentioned है कि रेलवे स्टेशन की रेलवे स्टेशन प्लेटफॉर्म्स की लेंथ क्या होगी. सो उससे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हमने डिस्कस किया एक तो ये एनुअल रिपोर्ट विच वुड बी इन द फॉर्म ऑफ इंटरनल परफॉर्मेंस ऑडिट. देन हमने पंक्चुअलिटी की बात करी, उसके बाद हमने फ्री ट्रेन्स की बात करी, उसमें टारगेट की बात करी. So in the opinion section, the topic is that should India consider phasing out of the nuclear power or not? So here we have the views of R. Shrikant, who is a professor and dean at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bengaluru, and he's also the head of Energy, Environment, and Climate Change Program. And second personality is Rahul Tongia. He's a senior fellow Center for the Social and Economic Progress, New Delhi, where he leads the Energy, Natural Resources, and Sustainability Group. So the first question is कि globally what is the outlook for the nuclear power, especially जब हम solar and wind power की बात करते हैं तो they are becoming far more popular compared to the nuclear power. तो globally क्या outlook है? This is the first question. So here Arshikant is answering that a lot has happened in the last 2 years only, particularly Ukraine war के बाद nuclear power it is seeing a renaissance. Even in Europe, US and China, it has like anyway been surging ahead on the nuclear power. So कल हमने China की भी बात करी थी. So they are like having a target of increasing it as a like means of deterrence. And South Korea की बात करें तो its new president has changed the energy policy and committed to increasing the share of nuclear power in the country's energy mix to 30%. Then Japan की बात करें like which should have completely shut down the reactors after the Fukushima accident, it is restarting them. So even Japan में जहाँ ये attack किया गया वहाँ पे भी we are not seeing any phasing out of the nuclear energy, and they are having a plan to restart them. So 10 have already been restarted following the years of inspection and upgradation, and Japan had to do that because it was otherwise dependent either on the expensive imported coal or on the natural gas. So that's why that was the best alternative option available to Japan, and hence they have restarted their nuclear power plant. So beyond Germany, UK has also said that without scaling up the nuclear power, it won't be possible to decarbonize the electricity sector. So we can say कि global level पे different countries की हमने बात करी तो nuclear energy is definitely very very important. And जब हम decarbonization की बात करते हैं meeting those targets, इसमें nuclear energy का बहुत important role है. And globally एक इस क्वेश्चन पे भी डिबेट चल रहा है कि क्या सही में न्यूक्लियर पावर ग्रीन है या नहीं, but it is like absolutely low carbon even when you look at the life cycle cost of nuclear energy. So definitely it is low carbon, but a lot of countries they are saying that nuclear would be good to have in the mix because it is firm and dispatchable power, while wind and solar they are intermittent or they are variable also. So न्यूक्लियर के केस में उल्टा है, बट दिस इज वन बिलीव कि कंट्रीज बिलीव कि न्यूक्लियर मिक्स होना चाहिए, एनर्जी मिक्स होना चाहिए. एंड फॉर्म पावर की बात करें तो इट इज द पावर दैट कैन बी सेंट टू द इलेक्ट्रिक ग्रिड टू बी सप्लाइड वेन एवर इट इज नीडेड. सो न्यूक्लियर पावर इज द फर्म पावर कि जब मर्जी चाहो आप इलेक्ट्रिसिटी ग्रिड में भेज सकते हो, बट इन केस ऑफ विंड एंड सोलर, सोलर के लिए ऑब्वियसली यू नीड सन एंड विंड के लिए ऑब्वियसली विंड चाहिए, तो वो आपको 24/7 अवेलेबल नहीं रहता है. बट इन न्यूक्लियर वी कैन से इट्स अ फॉर्म ऑफ continuous energy. So that's another thing. And so Rahul also says ki I think a lot of scholars and people who care about the environment, they are just concerned that when Germany shut down its plants prematurely, from an environmental perspective, all the carbon in the cement is already sunk, and yet you have shut it down before its lifetime. So Germany में अभी कोई भी nuclear power plant नहीं है, and like they have prematurely shut them down. So it would be the same sort of thing for India or any other country also, जो यहाँ पे Germany की situation है. So using an asset, whether a car or चाहे वो power plant हो, till the end of its life is probably the best thing you could do for the environment, unless something can displace it entirely. So Germany ने क्या किया, prematurely shut down कर दिया अपने nuclear power plants. So we are saying कि एटलीस्ट जब तक लाइफ है तब तक यू नीड टू यूज इट, बट जर्मनी में जो रीजन दिया गया है, लाइक दैट इज फ्रॉम द एनवायरमेंटल पर्सपेक्टिव, दे हैव टेकन दिस डिसीजन टू प्रीमेच्योरली शट डाउन द न्यूक्लियर पावर प्लांट्स. सो आप ये तभी इस ऑप्शन को आप एग्जीक्यूट करोगे व्हेन यू हैव समथिंग जो करंट चीज को, जिसको आप कंप्लीटली शट डाउन करने का डिसीजन आपने लिया है, यू हैव अ बेस्ट ऑल्टरनेटिव टू दिस जो इसको कंप्लीटली रिप्लेस कर सकते हैं. So from the global perspective, the first question is like, do you have any alternative that would let you say कि I do not need nuclear energy? क्या ऐसा कोई alternative है कि we can say कि हमें nuclear energy की जरूरत नहीं है? So ये हमने बात कर ली है कि विंड एंड सोलर ऑल्टरनेटिव्स नहीं हो सकते हैं क्योंकि दे आर वेरिएबल इन नेचर, मतलब 24/7 दे आर नॉट अवेलेबल. Therefore, do you get your firm power? मतलब आपको अपनी मतलब how do you get your firm power जो like आपको ये surety रहे कि 24/7 you can get the energy supply. So a lot of countries they moved away from coal, but they went to the natural gas and not the renewables. So जहाँ पे भी countries में shift हुआ away from coal, they went to natural gas and renewable energy पे shift नहीं किए. So that's an important point that all of us need to keep in mind. And resistance to the nuclear energy is also driven by fears about its safety and nuclear proliferation or some other concerns related to that. So definitely कुछ concerns हैं when we talk about the proliferation of nuclear energy. And safety definitely one of the biggest concerns हैं, and some of those they still remain, but a lot has been diminished. So as we move forward, as we develop, as we move in future, so कुछ concerns definitely we can say कि कम हुए हैं, but still they exist. And partly after the Ukraine, but almost like also because the nuclear industry is moving towards the passive safety designs for the nuclear reactors. So safety की वजह से we can say कि ये जो concern था nuclear energy से related थोड़ा कम हुआ है, because we are seeing कि countries they are moving towards the passive safety designs for the nuclear reactors. And जो older designs थे, they required active cooling pumps, but you can now have systems which, even if the power fails, it will gradually and gracefully control the temperature, waste heat and things like that. So अब थोड़ा like we can say कि चीजें control की जा सकती हैं अगर power fail होता है, क्योंकि nuclear reaction एक ऐसा reaction है which becomes uncontrollable अगर ऐसा कोई मतलब safety lapse होता है तो, क्योंकि पहले वाले डिजाइन्स में यू रिक्वायर्ड एक्टिव कूलिंग पंप्स, बट अभी ऐसा नहीं है. एंड द वर्स्ट सॉर्ट ऑफ एक्सीडेंट जो हमने हिस्ट्री में देखा, दैट वाज चेर्नोबिल. इट वाज a design that will never get repeated again. So like these are the standards, including even in the Kudamkulam nuclear power plant जो इंडिया में तमिलनाडु में situated है. And another challenge is the cost. So obviously बहुत ज़्यादा आपको investment चाहिए when it comes to setting up such types of nuclear plants. And this is an area जहाँ पे nuclear has yet to fully prove itself, partly because of the cost overruns जो देखने को मिलते हैं, and partly because of other things also. But now we are looking at the new designs like the smaller modular reactors हमारे पास option है, and there is a belief that this will address the cost structure quite a bit going forward. So we are coming up with like alternatives as far as the nuclear power plants is concerned, क्योंकि they are heavily they require huge amount of investments, and अगर delay होता है तो cost overruns भी हो जाते हैं, but कुछ alternatives like small modular reactors आ रहे हैं जो हमें cost front पे help कर सकते हैं. So जो जैतपुर वाला न्यूक्लियर पावर प्लांट महाराष्ट्र में सिचुएटेड है, यहाँ पे हमने देखा है कि बेसिकली डिले हो रहा है, बट जो मेन रीजन है इसको हम डिटेल में ऑलरेडी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, सो विल नॉट गो थ्रू दिस क्वेश्चन. एंड न्यूक्लियर जो न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी है उससे रिलेटेड हमें ये पता होना चाहिए जो भी लाइक रॉ मटेरियल्स हैं, थोरियम हो गया, यूरेनियम हो गया, इंडिया में कहाँ कहाँ मिलते हैं, एंड इसके अलावा जो इंडिया ने कैसे ट्रांजिशन किया, जो डिफरेंट टाइप्स के न्यूक्लियर पावर प्लांट्स है, हैवी वाटर रिएक्टर्स है, प्रेशराइज्ड हैवी वाटर रिएक्टर्स हैं, तो उसका प्रॉपर आपको लाइक क्रोनोलॉजिकल सीक्वेंस पता होना इज ऑल्सो इम्पोर्टेंट फ्रॉम दिस टॉपिक. So here the question is कि India's nuclear plan is premised on working around its limited supply of enriched uranium. So elsewhere, wherever nuclear has taken off, there is no real issue of accessing the nuclear fuel. But ये challenge India के case में ज़रूर है that we have limited supply of enriched uranium. But बाकी countries के case में this is not a challenge for them. However, nuclear power, it is only 2.5% to 3.2% of India's installed and generated power. So right now the share is this much. And is it time that we revisit some of the assumptions under which nuclear program, the civil nuclear program particularly, it has been supported so far? So do we need to like revisit all those assumptions just के basis पे we are having the civil nuclear program? So India, we have very limited growth potential for hydropower, क्योंकि conserving biodiversity and the cost of rehabilitating and compensating the landowners, that is very high. So जो potential है hydropower का, that is limited in India. And of course जो seismological factors है, specifically Himalayan वाले region में, they are also very high. So we can't like be going ahead with building so many hydropower projects. So alternative to coal, India के case में क्या बचा? Nuclear power बचा. So we've got nearly 210 gigawatts of coal capacity, and it produces around 73% of electricity in India. Right now, this is the share. So highest electricity जो India में generate की जा रही है, that is coming from coal. न्यूक्लियर पावर का शेयर अभी हमने देखा थी, इट इज अराउंड 3.2%. सो जो हमारा रिसर्च है इनटू द डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ atomic energy and how it works, we can conclude कि business as usual continue नहीं कर सकते हैं अगर हमको really majorly like we need to shift towards the nuclear energy when it comes to the increasing its share in the total energy that is produced in India, total electricity that we are generating. So one of the major reasons is the growth of nuclear power. It is hindered because of we have monopoly, and monopoly is there of obviously public sector. All the reactors, they are operated by the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. And the first thing that must happen is the civilian nuclear program. So the author is not saying कि it should be privatized, but at least you should allow other government companies like NTPC हो गया to get into nuclear on their own. So अभी सिर्फ अगर हम public sector की भी बात करें तो right now the monopoly is enjoyed by only the Nuclear Power Corporation of India. So बाकी जो public sector में बाकी entities है, they also need to be allowed है. We are not saying कि आप nuclear power sector को completely privatize कर दो या भी private players को भी आप allow करो, but at least जो बाकी public sector players हैं उनको we can allow, so that जो monopoly वाला element है ये कम हो जाए. And we hope to achieve the target of net zero, which is no net carbon emissions by 2070. So इसके लिए we need something like 100 gigawatts by 2050. So we'll need a combination of small modular reactors also and large reactors also, but it cannot be done by only one company. So for meeting our target, we need ki more players come into the sector, and it has to be definitely done by multiple companies. So we need a kind of portfolio जब हम energy production की बात कर रहे हैं and multiple companies की बात कर रहे हैं. So energy, especially electricity, but energy overall, it is not going to be the one thing that solves all our problems. So it's going to be a mix of supply side and both demand side. And it's not just that if I just add solar, all the problems they would get solved. So some years ago, we used to lament ki, oh, only solar, like if only solar were cheaper or not. So well, it's pretty damn like cheap now, but it is not solving our problems. या फिर खाली बैटरीज की बात करें तो मतलब कि बात यही हो रही है कि कंप्लीटली किसी और ऑल्टरनेटिव पे भी हम कंप्लीटली डिपेंड होके चीजें सॉल्व नहीं कर सकते हैं. सो वी नीड अ पोर्टफोलियो ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजीज. जैसे हम डाइवर्सिफिकेशन ऑफ पोर्टफोलियो की बात करते हैं टू रिड्यूस आवर रिस्क, तो यहाँ पे भी पोर्टफोलियो ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजीज विद इन न्यूक्लियर सेक्टर एंड आउटसाइड द न्यूक्लियर सेक्टर, दैट वुड बी द मोस्ट बेस्ट ऑल्टरनेटिव मूविंग फॉरवर्ड. So should like India should never consider phasing out of the nuclear power. So like, is it true or not? So here the policy should be about enabling frameworks to let all the technologies play. So हमारी policy, हमारी schemes या फिर framework ऐसा होना चाहिए कि it should enable all the technologies, like they should get their relevant share, and the value जो nuclear energy provides, it is of being low carbon, it is firm, it is reliable. So definitely benefits bhi hai, and if those do work out competitively as having that value, they will automatically grow. And ऐसा कोई like author is saying कि ऐसा he is not in favor of any particular target कि there shall be X% of energy जो nuclear sector से आनी चाहिए. ऐसा fixed target रखना is not something कि आपने target fix कर दिया and आप बस उसके चिपके रहोगे. So what if something else came up? आने वाले time में definitely possible है कि we might have a new technology, something new might evolve. So उस केस में just fixing the percentage is not going to be fruitful. And what if prices change? What if the technology changes? So the government, and for that matter, anybody, it shouldn't be taking technology bets per se, but policy should be about frameworks and the enablement. So policy का main role framework and enablement तक ही होना चाहिए. So यहाँ पे हम बात कर सकते हैं civil liability या फिर support mechanisms, all of that matters. And so if nuclear didn't scale up to its potential, on the one extreme, you could say, let's kill it. But on the other extreme, you would continue with it also. So, or you would like figure out why it didn't grow, and if it does not perform well, its share in the energy mix will fall. So these are different possibilities कि अगर share नहीं increase होता है तो क्या आप तब सोचोगे कि you need to completely phase out the nuclear power plants. And ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि अगर पोटेंशियल तक इंक्रीज नहीं किए बट स्टिल वी आर कंटिन्यूइंग विद व्हाटएवर वी आर हैविंग एज फार एज न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी शेयर इज कंसिडर्ड. एंड ये भी पॉसिबल है कि वी माइट कंसिडर कि क्या रीजंस हैं कि न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी का शेयर इंक्रीज नहीं हुआ एंड व्हाई वी आर नॉट सीइंग गुड परफॉर्मेंस एट दैट फ्रंट. सो एनर्जी मिक्स में उसका शेयर फॉल भी हो सकता है, इंक्रीज भी हो सकता है, एज इन व्हेन वी टेक द स्टेप्स एंड अकॉर्डिंगली जो भी एनालिसिस एंड रिसर्च की जाती है. So in this picture, you can see it's a Humboldt penguin. It is named Oscar and is a veterinary doctor. And inside the temperature controlled penguin enclosure of the zoo in Mumbai. So it's in Mumbai, and obviously the penguins, so temperature accordingly एक ऐसा chamber है जहाँ पे temperature accordingly जो उनको habitat से suit करता है, that is maintained. So World Penguin Day, it is celebrated on 25th of April, and the day is observed in honor of these remarkable birds and their place in our world as climate change and other pressures threaten their habitat and food sources, leading to significant declines in some populations. So you can find out about their IUCN status and other places of their habitat. So threat of rising sea levels. Again, the topic is climate change. So किस rate से sea levels rise हो रहे हैं, क्या reasons हैं, and what is the report of the World Meteorological Organization, and क्या problems हैं जो rising sea levels की वजह से हो सकती हैं. So we'll be looking into all these domains. So World Meteorological Organization, it is found in a new report that world's sea level is rising at an unprecedented rate, portending potentially disastrous consequences for the weather, agriculture, the extant groundwater crisis, and the social disparities. So obviously not good things coming up as far as the rising sea level is concerned. So jo report hai, it is titled The State of the Global Climate 2022. So it is published by WMO, and it is saying कि जो जिस rate से sea level rise हो रहा है, it is rising at an unprecedented accelerated rate. And there is consistent rise in global temperatures, record-breaking increase in the concentration of greenhouse gases, which is happening, as well as glaciers loss, sustained drought-like conditions. East Africa में देखने को मिल रही है record rainfall. पाकिस्तान में वहाँ पे floods हमने देखे. There was unprecedented heat waves that struck Europe and China in 2022. So everything has been just put up in these words. So all of them are the keywords which have been used, and उसके अलावा जो हमने 2022 में देखा, तो आप देख सकते हो कि हर टाइप का एक्सट्रीम सिचुएशन हमें देखने को मिल रही है. And it said that droughts, floods, heat waves, they affected the communities on every continent and cost many billions of dollars also. So the Antarctic sea ice hai, it fell to its lowest extent on record, and the melting of some European glaciers was literally off the charts. So ये हम पहले ही देख चुके हैं कि जिस rate से the glaciers are melting, they are literally off the charts. So rising sea levels, definitely it is one of the compounding disasters. It also merits individual attention for the unique crisis it can precipitate, especially to coastal areas hain, and communities there that depend on life in the sea and its ability to render the loss of land also. So how much is the sea rising? So the rate of global mean sea level rise, it has doubled between the first decade of the satellite record and the last. So the rate has doubled. And so using the satellite altimeters, we've been measuring the sea level rise since 1990s. And these instruments, they send radar pulses to the sea surface, and then we measure the time they take to get back and the change in their intensity. So the higher the sea level, the faster and shorter would be the return signal. So अगर हम exact rate की बात करें, तो the rate of sea level rise was 2.27 mm per year. अगर हम 1993 से 2002 वाले decade की बात करें, and now it has shot up to 4.62 millimeters per year during the last decade. So it's almost doubled. So what is causing the accelerated sea level rise? Kya reasons hain? What are the causes behind this accelerated increase? So WMO report jo hai, it is pointing towards some of the factors like ocean warming, ice loss from the glaciers and ice sheets, and changes in the land water storage. So all of these are the keywords and three main reasons jiski wajah se sea level is rising at an accelerated rate. So report, it is also quantifying the individual contribution of these three factors. And agar hum share की बात करें, loss of glaciers and ice sheets, they have contributed 36% between 2005 to 2019 in terms of the level of sea rise. Ocean warming, which is a phenomenon of rising the mean ocean temperature. So it has contributed 55%, and changes in the storage of land water, it has contributed less than 10%. So maximum aa raha hai ocean warming se, then from the melting of glaciers and the ice sheets, and then the storage of land water. So increasing concentrations of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases drive global warming. and 90% of the extra heat is stored in the oceans. So this leads to the ocean वार्मिंग ऑल्सो, क्योंकि 90% अगर जो एक्स्ट्रा हीट जनरेट होती है ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस की वजह से, दे आर ट्रैप्ड इन ओशन. सो ऑब्वियसली जो ओशन का टेम्परेचर है वो डेफिनेटली इंक्रीज ही होने वाला है. सो जैसे जैसे ओशन दे आर गेटिंग हीटेड अप, इट अंडरगोज थर्मल एक्सपेंशन, सो विच इन टर्न इट लीड्स टू राइज इन द global sea levels. And one measure of the ocean warming is the ocean heat content. So 2022 में इसने नया रिकॉर्ड बनाया, एंड रिपोर्ट ऑल्सो सेज कि अर्थ्स आइस कवर विच इज नोन एज क्रायोस्फेयर, जो अर्थ का आइस कवर है, वी कॉल इट बाय द टर्म क्रायोस्फेयर, इट हैज थिन्ड. सो मतलब आइस ज्यादा मेल्ट हो रही है. सो क्रायोस्फेयर में व्हाट वी इंक्लूड, इट इंक्लूड्स द आर्कटिक एंड द अंटार्कटिक रीजन्स विच इज कॉल्ड द सी आइस, and we include glaciers, ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica, then seasonal snow cover and permafrost. So mass of land that remains below 0 degrees Celsius for at least 2 straight years, usko hum bolte hain permafrost. So all of these, they are included in the cryosphere. So the report is saying that it has thinned. So what do the report's findings mean for us? So scientists at the Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun, who works on the effect of the sea level change on the coastal ecosystems, he said कि जो WMO report है, it confirms the trends that are already well known. So ये चीजें हमें पहले से पता है, बस ये report जो है, it is confirming them. So they have used more or less the best possible data. And what problems will the sea level rise cause? So let's move on to this thing. So one is that the accelerated pace, it will cause changes in the land cover, that is what will be land and what will be sea in the future. इसमें change देखने को मिलेगा obviously, क्योंकि अगर sea level increase हो रहा है तो land would get submerged. So क्या land रहेगा, क्या sea area रहेगा, that would change in future. This is one impact that it would be having, and it is having. So जो coastal communities है, they would definitely face an acute shortage of land for human use. So this is the land crunch problem जो इसकी वजह से होने वाली है, and it will mean that those who are better off, they will be able to cope better than the marginalized groups, leading to an increase in the social disparities between people living in the coastal areas. So इसकी वजह से जो social impact है, that would be increase in the disparities, क्योंकि जो well off people है, they would be able to handle it in a much better way compared to the ones which are below them. So this would be like increasing the social disparities as well. Second is the weather formations like cyclones. They are known to typically originate in the open seas. So जैसे जैसे sea level rise होता जाएगा, along with the rise in the ocean temperature also, so the changes of cyclones, that chances of cyclones, that would increase, and this would definitely affect the coastal communities and leading to large economic liabilities even for the tropical countries like India and South Africa, which have high population densities, and that is also even in the coastal areas also. So that is the second major impact, कि frequency of cyclones would increase, क्योंकि जैसे जैसे sea level would increase and warming of oceans would also increase. So frequency, the chances of cyclones would increase. Third impact is that as the sea level rises, more seawater could seep into the ground, leading to groundwater, which is usually fresh water, turning more and more saline. So आने वाले time में groundwater, which is fresh, which is potent for drinking, it would turn more saline क्योंकि sea level rise होगा तो sea water would get mixed with the groundwater. So this in turn, it can exacerbate water crisis in coastal areas as well as agriculture in those surrounding areas. So these are the main problems that would be there in future because of sea level rise. So इसका impact societies पे क्या होगा? एक तो हमने देख लिया, it would be like increasing the social disparities. For example, अगर हम बात करें Sundarban's Delta in West Bengal, so which is the world's largest mangrove areas, rising sea levels and coastal erosion due to the loss of land and sediment from the coastal areas, it has left more islands submerged underwater, and that in turn it has forced the members of the local communities to migrate to other regions. So this is the first and the most important and very, we can say, huge social impact on the communities. And जो coastal communities है, obviously the economic activities है, which they are tied intricately with the coastal ecosystem. So changes in the coastal ecosystem as a result of the sea level rise, especially जब it is happening at such a faster rate than the rehabilitative policies जो government लेके आ रही है, and the time it is taking to, you know, getting them implemented. So usse higher pace pe to sea level rise ho raha hai, and things are changing so quickly ki policies they are not able to basically catch up to that. So it will further endanger the socio-economic stability of these communities. So a combination of these forces having increased child trafficking in the Sundarban areas has already been documented. So iski wajah se child trafficking ki cases have also increased. So here, when we have a look at this map, so it is talking about ki what is the number of population that has been displaced by 2100. So it is assuming 2-meter rise in the sea level, and like obviously that's an approximate. So as per that, what would be the size of population जो to 2100 तक displace हो जाएगी, 2100 तक, when we'll be starting with the next century. So maximum आप देख सकते हो South Asia में 57 million people would be migrated, they would be displaced. Next in East Asia, then Southeast Asia, इसके अलावा we have North and West Europe, North America. So major impact Asia वाले region में हमें देखने को मिल रहा है. And what are the researchers saying? So they say कि अगर global temperature increase, it stays below 2 degrees Celsius, which is also the target of the Paris Agreement 2015. So on average, melting ice sheets, they would contribute estimated 26 centimeter of the sea level rise by 2100. So worst case scenario है 5% chance that contribution could be as much as 80 centimeter also. So rise could exceed 1 meter if other factors like melting of glaciers, expansion of ocean water as it warms, they are also taken into account. So this is the worst case scenario. And agar global temperature, it increases by 5 degrees Celsius, where the current trajectory of economic growth continues. So on average, the melting of ice sheets it would contribute to estimated 51 centimeter of the sea level rise. And इसमें worst case scenario is 5% chance लिया है, तो it is saying कि around 2 meter तक sea level rise हो सकता है, and this would be displacing as many as 187 million people. So we need to be prepared for all of these things. So we have sent our third ship, which is INS Turkish, to Port Sudan for evacuating the citizens from there. So it is under Operation Kaveri that we are evacuating Indians from Sudan. So Foreign Secretary says that evacuation efforts, they are facing challenges such as lack of diesel and the buses, and calls situation in Sudan highly volatile and unpredictable. So he expresses gratitude to Saudi Arabia for cooperation in the Operation Kaveri. So Saudi Arabia is playing an important role. And as I've told you, key geography of this area is very important. And जो बाकी दो हमने ships भेजी हैं, that were INS Sumeda and INS Teak. Third one is INS Turkish. So soon Indian Army is going to raise cyber operations and support wings. So as the nature and the form of warfare is changing, so accordingly, we are also going ahead with the changes. So several major decisions they were taken at the Army Commanders Conference that was held last week. So they decided to operationalize the command cyber operations and support wings in the immediate future with current focus on the net-centric operations, convert the 5-year technical entry scheme for entry of the officers to 4 years from January 2024, train the motivated soldiers for Paralympic events and double the sustenance allowance to specially able children and the personnel killed in line of duty through the Army General Insurance Fund. So these were all the decisions which were taken. So ready to play the facilitator to push government to ease the concerns of the same-sex partners and conscious of our limitations as a court. So court is saying ki obviously it is like they are conscious ki kya limitations as far as judiciary is concerned for this matter of legalization the same-sex marriages. So it is saying ki we are ready to play the role of facilitator. So we can facilitate major role legislature ही play करने वाला है. And they are conscious कि क्या उनकी powers हैं and क्या limitations हैं. And Supreme Court says कि it can facilitate the solutions for day-to-day human concerns of cohabiting partners without touching upon the issue of the legal recognition of the same-sex marriage. So except for the legal recognition of the same-sex relationships as marriage, if there are problems they face, they can be addressed by the judiciary. Coming to the world page, so here, so Ukraine received 1,550 armored vehicles and 230 tanks. This is data coming from NATO chief. So Iran's navy, it seizes oil tanker in Gulf of Oman. So पहले भी instances देखे गए हैं. And there are like growing tensions over Tehran's nuclear program. So latest such capture in a waterway crucial for the global energy supplies. So अगर ऐसे instances आने वाले time में increase होंगे तो obviously they would not be good for the global energy supplies and prices would further increase. So it was like coming from Kuwait and listed its destination as Houston, Texas. So it was going to US. But this has now been captured by Iran's navy. So probe the Khalistani extremism. This is what the review panel urges the UK government. So we know कि globally different countries may how people there are like supporting the supporters of Khalistan. So report calls for a nuanced understanding of the subversive activity, and on Hindu nationalism it says that the government should be attentive to nationalist movements inciting prejudice in the British society. Coming to the business page now. So RBI governor urges the lenders to continually assess the risks and bolster the capital buffers. So definitely, जो banking system है, it is very strong in India, and these are certain steps जो हमें आने वाले time में we need to keep an eye on and we need to adhere to. जहाँ तक की बात आती है lenders, which is banks, जो आप loans दे रहे हो, you need to keep assessing the risk and bolster capital buffers कि अगर ऐसी कोई situation होती है so things remain under our control. So RBI chief cites the financial instability in some advanced economies to stress the need to boost liquidity buffers beyond the regulatory minimum. So जो regulatory minimum है जो as per the norms आपको minimum amount of liquidity buffers maintain करने पड़ते हैं उससे beyond अगर आप maintain करोगे तो that would be really helpful क्योंकि financial instability के concerns हमें ग्लोबली एडवांस्ड वर्ल्ड में देखने को मिल रहे हैं. अभी रिसेंटली वी सॉ 2 banks they failed in USA. So given that, we need to be like prepared for that also. So central bank governor says कि lenders can thereby ensure continued organized resilience and sustained growth. So continued organizational resilience. These are the keywords. So RBI governor exhorts banks to reappraise risks at frequent intervals and build adequate capital and liquidity buffers. So he flags the likelihood of risks cropping up from the segments of a bank's balance sheet, which may have hitherto been considered relatively safer. So these are some of the concerns which have been shared by him. So recent stress test results, they show कि Indian banking sector, it has remained resilient. So जो frequency है of, doing these stress tests or even assessing the risk on the part of the banks, that needs to increase so that we are on safer side. So the gross NPA ratio here for the scheduled commercial banks, it was 4.41% at the end of December, and it was down from 5.8% in March 2022, and it was 7.3% in March 2021. So gross NPA ratio, definitely it is coming down. So rules for the gold import from UAE, they have been eased down, and so the government, it has decided to call for fresh applications to import gold at concessional tariffs from the UAE after changes they were made to the eligibility norms that allowed just the manufacturers and the jewelers to use this window. So the Director General of Foreign Trade here said that easing these restrictions was already under discussion with the Department of Revenue when an export facilitation committee met and considered the applications for availing 140 metric tons of gold imports quota available for this year. So USA की Q1 GDP expands 1% as firms they rein in the inventories. So US economic growth, it slowed more than expected in the first quarter, as acceleration in the consumer spending that was offset by the businesses cutting back on inventory investment in anticipation of the weaker demand this year amid higher borrowing costs. So borrowing costs ज़्यादा हैं, and firms, they are cutting down on their inventories क्योंकि they are expecting कि आने वाले time में demand और slow down हो जाएगी, तो there is no point of investing so much in the inventories. Plus borrowing costs भी ज़्यादा है, तो that's why we can say these are the main reasons कि Q1 growth rate USA में जो expectations थी उससे भी कम record की गई है. So GDP it grew at 1.1% annualized rate पे. Government said that in its advanced estimate of the first quarter GDP, so economy expanded 2.6% in the fourth quarter of the previous financial year. Moving on to the Mint newspapers. So here the first topic that we are taking up is that is European Union's carbon tax protectionist है क्या वो green good है? So उसका India पे क्या impact है? That's what we're going to talk about. So it is like already caused concern among some developing countries, and how is it going to impact India is that's what we're going to delve into. So basically डिसीजन ये है कि जो यूरोपियन यूनियन है कार्बन बॉर्डर टैक्स है दैट इज गोइंग टू बी इम्पोज्ड. जो भी गुड्स यूरोपियन यूनियन में इंपोर्ट किए जाएंगे उनके ऊपर ये कार्बन बॉर्डर टैक्स इम्पोज किया जाएगा एज पर देयर कार्बन फुटप्रिंट. सो इट इज सेट टू कम इनटू फोर्स फ्रॉम 3 years, बट डेफिनेटली 3 साल के बाद इट वुड बी इम्प्लीमेंटेड. बट अगेन जो डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज हैं उनके ऊपर इसका क्या impact होगा, that is much more important for us. So what is the tax about? So it is the carbon border adjustment mechanism which is going to impose tariffs on goods from countries that are not a part of the emission trading system. So जो countries emission trading system का part नहीं है and goods would be imported from them, so उनके ऊपर carbon border tax impose किया जाएगा. So most developing countries, they aren't a part of this regional arrangement. So that's why developing countries के ऊपर इसका ज़्यादा impact होगा. So जो goods की international competitiveness है, that would get hampered. And this opens the scope for the carbon leakage where companies, they shift to production outside the European Union to countries जहाँ पे ETS नहीं है. So benefiting from the perceived lenient climate standards, this shift leads to circumvention of the emission standards. So It basically seeks to plug the carbon leakages by taxing the imports from countries जहाँ पे emission trading system नहीं है. So what would be the sectors जहाँ पे major impact हमें देखने को मिलेगा? So to begin with, iron and steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizer, hydrogen, and electrical energy, they are going to be facing the major impact. So between October 2023 and December 2025, exporters to European Union, they will have to provide information on the carbon footprint of all these products. So uske basis pe accordingly tax would be imposed, and companies which fail to provide the information, they will be charged using the default CO2 emission values on their products. So fear is that soon most other products they would also be covered under the tax. So abhi limited products के ऊपर impose किया जाएगा, but आने वाले time में fear ये भी है, expectation ये भी है कि it could be expanded further. And European Union के अलावा बाकी countries advanced world can also come up with such kind of tax, which can include UK, Japan, Canada, and US. So that's the fear. So what is the impact likely to be? So क्या likely impact हो सकता है? So definitely it would significantly increase the cost of importing from the non-ETS countries, potentially making them unviable. So obviously आपके export जो आप goods export करोगे to these countries, उनका prices increase हो जाएगा after this imposition of the carbon border tax, and cement पे it could lead to an increase in cost by 90%. And more than a quarter of India's iron, steel, aluminium exports, they went to European Union in 2022. So that is a concern for India. And अगर और products add किए जाते हैं, so billions could be in lost additional cost. So additional cost just scale पे increase होगी, इसमें billions of dollars can went, it can like go into that. So जो ये policy है, क्या ये protectionist है in the like green garb आप बोल रहे हो कि in order to reduce the carbon emissions, do you think कि this is a protectionist policy या फिर मतलब decision आपने ये लिया है कि in order to reduce the carbon emissions you are taking this step, but ultimately क्या ये एक protectionist form की policy है या नहीं? So main charge by India and some other developing countries is this, like this is nothing but a trade barrier that is discriminatory, and it is against the principles of equity under Paris Agreement on climate change. So this is what is India's stand, and जो बाकी developing countries हैं, they are saying कि ये और कुछ भी नहीं है, just it is just a trade barrier जो discriminatory है, and obviously this is violating the principles of equity of the Paris Agreement. And then again ये टॉपिक हमेशा रहता है जब भी हम क्लाइमेट चेंज की बात करते हैं कि क्या डेवलपिंग इकोनॉमीज they should be penalized for the emissions when they are not historically responsible for climate change. So ये बोला जाता है जो developed world है they are responsible for the climate change. So आप developing countries को क्यों penalize कर रहे हो for the emissions जो उन्होंने किए ही नहीं है? So European Union contends the higher cost of compliance makes their industries unviable, and carbon tax is one way of leveling the field, but some see it as a like it's just kind of a ploy. So how is India reacting to it? So India is set to lead a pushback against the tax at the WTO, and WTO में we are going to raise this issue, and already जो basic nations हैं जिसमें Brazil है, South Africa, India, and China, they have condemned this tax. So additionally, India is weighing retaliatory tariffs on the imports from European Union. So India could retaliate by imposing tariffs on the goods जो हम European Union से import करते हैं. So it will also likely impact talks on the free trade agreement जो चल रहे हैं between India and European Union, and as in case of the agricultural subsidies also, WTO pay, this is the issue, and that could set off a flurry of disputes in the next few years and even deepen the divide between the developed and the developing nations. Moving on to the Financial Express now. So here, Online Gaming Center is set to seek differential taxation जहाँ तक कि online gaming industry की बात करते हैं. So GST Council may take a final call in June But let's see once we have a final decision on this. So there's kind of a balancing act जहाँ पे 28% GST would be imposed on winning dependent on a certain outcome or it is a nature of betting or gambling. So उस पे 28% GST would be levied. 18% currently it is levied on the online gaming platform fee. So this is currently imposed. So online games which involve some amount of skill could be taxed at lower rate of 18%. तो जो मेजर हर्डल्स फेस करने को मिल रही थी फॉर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इन IFSC they have been removed and Indian residents they can choose the LRS window. So resident individuals they have been allowed to open a foreign currency account in the IFSC under the liberalized remittance scheme framework. And until now, any funds which were lying idle in FCA for up to 15 days, they had to be repatriated to domestic rupee account. So unutilized funds, they can now be repatriated and surrendered to an authorized dealer bank within 180 days. And many investors, they had faced difficulties as the transaction timelines often got extended due to various reasons. So ये कुछ hurdles and that has been removed. So IFSC is the International Financial Services Center जो गुजरात में located है. It is called the Gift City also. And there is this liberalized remittance scheme. So now even Indian residents, they can also open up the accounts and these are some of the changes which have been done. So crop productivity की बात करें तो the country's population it will rise by 2050 and therefore there's a need to prepare a roadmap to meet the requirement of the food grains and other farm products. So food security वाला aspect की यहाँ बात की जा रही है. So automatic exchange of information की बात करें तो India to call for sharing G20 data on the non-financial assets. So tax transparency, it is high on the agenda. And there's a need to broaden the scope of automatic exchange of information so that information could be used not only to check tax evasion, but also for other non-tax law enforcing purposes. And we would also like expansion of the CRS from the financial to new other non-financial accounts and assets because jo risk hai, they are not only in the financial assets, there is a risk of tax evasion in non-financial and real assets and properties also. So that's what India's stand is. तो लीगलाइजेशन द सेम सेक्स मैरिजेस का इकोनॉमिक इम्पैक्ट भी देखने को मिल सकता है which would be like unlocking the gains for the economy as well, but this would be possible only when the population and the people they are given same rights as the heterosexual peers. So USA में भी this thing was seen कि once there was like marriage equality nationwide applicable की गई same sex weddings they generated an economic boost of $3.8 billion for the state and the local economies. इसके अलावा जो important judgments है that we've already taken up and मतलब एक economic angle है which you can add up, so that is the new element. So यहाँ पे artificial intelligence की बात की जा रही है. इस पे I've already told you कि जो generative artificial intelligence वाला aspect है, that is important to understand. So what do people around the world they think about the technology's future? And as complex crises such as war in Europe, we are seeing climate change, rising inflation, energy shortage, famines plague consumers around the world. Technology is expected to play a key role to resolve all these challenges. So respondents to a global survey by Bosch said that artificial intelligence and 5G, they will be the most relevant tools in solving these niggling issues going forward. So global index, artificial intelligence 41, you can see 5G is 39, self-driving cars and automated driving cars 26. So majorly जो technology वाली बात की जा रही है, artificial intelligence top पे है, 5G, both of these are going to play an important role as far as dealing with the future challenges is concerned. Coming to Indian Express, so here already talked about this talks between India and China. So wrestlers, they are basically saying why the top cricketers, they are silent and even others. So she says, are you also afraid? So they backed Black Lives Matter and they may be worried about the effect on the brand deals. So that's what Manish Phogat has to say. And जो इनका like protest hai, the allegations they have leveled against the president of the Wrestling Federation of India. So all of that are very serious, and this has been already said by the Supreme Court as well. So she's just raising the point कि अगर Indian cricketers like support किया था the Black Lives Matter, so why can't they support them? So that's just one point that she has raised. So जो दंतेवाड़ा में इंसिडेंट हुआ, माउस्ट they are tagged. इसके बारे में we have already seen in detail जो relevant चीजें थी from the perspective of examination. So this was discussed in yesterday's analysis video, so you can go through that for that. And moving further for time being, so population growth, इसमें भी हम critical analysis कर चुके हैं, so we'll not be taking up this again. So lack of action in the sexual harassment complaints against the former Wrestling Federation of India's president, despite the protest by decorated sportsperson, sends out a discouraging message. So despite the protest, अभी कोई ऐसा real impact या real step नहीं लिया गया है, which we can say which satisfies them, and they are still protesting. मतलब पहले they were promised a different committee बनाई जाएगी to deal with all of these allegations, but now they have again come to protest, and they are protesting again for their rights and जो भी concerns उन्होंने raise किए हैं. So when complaints lodged by the top level national and the international players who have won laurels for the country, they meet with such a fate, the signal that goes out to other women who suffer such violation of their rights is to remain silent. If this is not to happen, the issues raised by the wrestlers need wider support, failing which few who have spoken up may once again be silenced and marginalized. So let's wait and watch what would be the steps that would be taken, क्योंकि अभी तक FIR भी नहीं की गई है. So coming to the economy page here, only the things that we have not discussed will be taking the map. So India wants the non-financial assets, including in the OECD Information Exchange Framework. So ये हमने Financial Express में अभी देखा था. And इसके अलावा coming to the explained page, this is very important for us. So mutual fund investments की बात करें तो we are seeing big change in the small towns. So how has basically the equation changed? So as the smallest cities, they have increased their weight in the mutual fund investment over the past 3 years. Not only have they eaten into the share of the large metros, but they have also stabilized the flow of funds for the fund houses when the market movement is adverse. So in fact, while the share of top 35 cities that have came down from 80% to 72%, so the biggest change came at the bottom of the pyramid in the other cities, जाकि हम like semi-urban and rural areas की बात कर रहे हैं. So individually they are contributing 0.01 से 0.03% of the industry assets under management or even lower, but together they have created a big change. So what does it actually mean? So many within the industry, they feel that this is an indication of deepening of Indian equity markets. And basically like more penetration, people are getting much more aware. And it is also a reflection of democratization of equity culture in the country. So these are the key words. So it is telling a story of an aspirational India looking for higher returns on their investments and a better future. It also shows the faith and confidence which small investors in smaller towns has on the steps taken by the regulator to protect the investor interest. So it is an indicator of this as well. And also it is an impact of कि जिस ease से अब आप invest कर सकते हो using your mobile phones. You just have to open a demat account. उसके लिए there are a number of apps and brokers. Easily the apps are so easily accessible and online आप अपना demat account open up कर सकते हो. So with this ease also we are seeing this huge jump in the share of the smaller and the semi-urban areas. So that's the thing there. And पहले हमें मतलब पता भी नहीं होता था कि वी कैन इन्वेस्ट मनी इन सच अ वे ऑल्सो. पहले बस दो चीजों को पता, तो प्रॉपर्टी खरीदो या गोल्ड खरीदो इफ यू वांट टू इन्वेस्ट योर मनी. बट नाउ इट्स गुड की पीपल इवन इन द रूरल एरियाज एंड सेमी अर्बन एरियाज दे आर लाइक getting more aware about this investment thing. So rapid support forces की बात करें तो the fighting between the rapid support forces and the Sudan's military has led to the crisis in the country. So this is a paramilitary force, which is the rapid support forces. And India, it is in the process of evacuating the people from Sudan, where a fierce battle between the military and paramilitary forces. It started from April 15, and clashes follow months of heightened tensions between the army and the rapid support force head. So generals, they are at loggerheads as they fight for the control of Sudan's major institutions. But this wasn't always the case. So they had joined forces to oust the authoritarian president before Omar al-Bashir 2019 May. And one reason for their fallout, according to experts, is the growing ambitions of Hamdan to lead Sudan. So आने वाले time में basically उनकी जो aspirations थी वो change हो गई, and that's how they are now clashing together. So in recent years, he has amassed vast amounts of wealth also. And that's the reason we are seeing clash between them. So basically, who are these rapid support forces? So although formally established in 2013, they can trace its roots to the Janjaweed militias drawn from a group of Arab tribes, primarily based in the Western Sudan, including Darfur. So main roots is from there, and they were first armed and organized in early 1980s to help the government expand its influence in neighboring civil war-torn Chad. So Janjaweed militias, they came into the global prominence 2003 May when they helped Sudanese government quell a rebellion by peasants in Darfur. So while the military attacked using air force and heavy weapons, the Janjaweed perpetrated violence against the rebels and civilians in the isolated areas. So that's the role they have played before also. And according to United Nations, an estimated 3 lakh people they were killed in the conflict between 2003 and 8. And 2007 में US government termed the violence in Darfur as genocide. So that's the situation there. And then coming again on the legalization of same-sex marriages, the center arguments in the Supreme Court against the legalizing same-sex marriage covered issues from the privacy to the personal laws to the powers of the parliament. And there are 6 key points which were raised by the central government, the Solicitor General on the part of the center. So first, let's go through what he has to say. So he's saying it is submitted that consenting the sex between two adults is in the sphere of privacy within the intimate zone. However, recognizing the relationship between the very same two individuals as marriage falling in the public zone has a necessary and inevitable public element. So, सबसे पहले बात करेंगे definition of marriage की. So the center's first submission was कि various religions they have always recognized marriage only between a man and a woman. So yoga religious angle. And the Solicitor General argued that if a new idea of marriage has to be imagined also, then it must be parliament and not the court which can create it. So this was clearly जो गवर्नमेंट का कहना है कि अगर हमें जो आइडिया ऑफ मैरिज है उसको री इमेजिन भी करना है तो पावर पार्लियामेंट के पास है एंड नॉट विद द judiciary. So it is essential to note कि marriage even under the so-called जो special marriage act है, it originates in the personal law. So the said secular enactments, they were enacted not as a means to create a new social legal institution. So जो special marriage act है 1954 की उसका origin भी personal law से भी है and it is secular in nature definitely. जो interfaith marriages हैं it is basically supporting that, but उसका मतलब जो मेन आइडिया उसके पीछे ये नहीं था कि इट वुड बी हेल्पिंग इन क्रिएटिंग अ न्यू सोशल लीगल इंस्टीट्यूशन जो हम यहाँ पे लीगलाइजेशन ऑफ सेम सेक्स मैरिजेस की बात कर रहे हैं, बट रादर इट वाज अ मींस टू ओवरकम सम लिमिटेशंस ऑफ द रिलीजियस पर्सनल लॉज. सो मेन आइडिया उसके पीछे ये था व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द स्पेशल मैरिज एक्ट ऑफ 1954. So legitimate interest of the state की बात करें, responding to the argument of the petitioners की state can have no role in regulating the personal relationships. The Solicitor General argued that the state has a legitimate interest in regulating marriages. So the right to marry, it is not absolute. It is always subject to the statutory regime provided by the competent legislature. So आपकी जो right to marry है, that is not an absolute right. And apart from this, so that's why state it can claim legitimate interest to regulate when to marry, how many times you can marry, and whom you can marry, and how to separate. So these are the legitimate interest of the state, जहाँ पे the state can intervene. So right to privacy was one argument that was presented forward by the government. So 2017 में we had the Supreme Court judgment जिसमें right to privacy was identified as a fundamental right, and Supreme Court had held that sexual orientation that is an essential component of identity. So equal protection demands protection of identity of every individual without discrimination. And the center argued that while the right to privacy definitely वो exist करती है, it cannot be extended to marriages. So right to privacy को आप marriage तक extend नहीं कर सकते हो. This is what center argues. So when consulting adults, they want a social acceptance of the relationship by way of marriage. Center ने argue किया कि that they are conferred with public status by the state. And right to privacy अगर आपके पास fundamental right है, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि the marriages they are same sex marriages they are legal. So आप उसको right to privacy को marriage तक extend नहीं कर सकते हो. एंड नेक्स्ट चीज जो हाईलाइट की गई कि पावर पार्लियामेंट के पास है अगर हमें मैरिज की जो डेफिनेशन है आइडिया को फिर से री इमेजिन भी करना है अकॉर्डिंगली जो भी डेफिनेशन में जो भी चेंज करने भी हैं तो पार्लियामेंट के पास पावर है, जुडिशरी के पास पावर नहीं है. So center has repeatedly said this thing. A decision on the same-sex marriage can only be made in the parliament. So argument essentially it is that there exists a democratic right of the people to regulate themselves and that it cannot be mandated by a court. And apart from this, center also argued that the court will be venturing into unknown arenas if it legislates on the same-sex marriages that could raise several unintended consequences in law also. So as per the information available in the public domain, there are a total 72 categories of genders falling within LGBTQIA plus community. So this would mean that several permutations and combinations of marriages and the fact-specific peculiar problems arising from the reforms that would be possible, and it will be impossible for the courts to conceive all such permutations and combinations. So obviously जब आप बात करते हो कि you will have to change the definition of marriage, तो उसका impact बाकी और laws पे भी होगा, and बहुत सारे और जो required amendments and changes हैं वहां तक judiciary cannot reach. So interpreting the law की जो बात आती है, so the key argument of the center is that the court cannot interpret Special Marriage Act to include the same-sex marriage in a meaningful way. So demand petitioners की जो थी, they were saying कि जो Special Marriage Act है आप उसको gender neutral बना दीजिए so that जो सेम सेक्स मैरिजेस हैं they get legalized under this particular act. So center का कहना ये है कि कोर्ट में मतलब इतना नहीं है कि they can interpret this law to include the same sex marriages in a meaningful way. So it is ultimately within the domain of the parliament only. And it was also argued that court will have to examine entire architecture of the act rather than examine few words like husband and wife. So obviously domain फिर increase हो जाता है, आप just marriage तक limit नहीं कर सकते हो चीजें. And इसके अलावा instances where law provides specific rights to a wife, for example, argued कि law says that the wife acquires the domicile of the husband upon marriage. So who will be the wife in the same-sex marriages? So ये सारी चीजें फिर बहुत सारा मतलब areas open up हो जाते हैं जहाँ पे questions raise किए जा सकते हैं. So this is a right specifically given to the wife, and in case of gay marriages, who would get this right is the question. So petitioner's argument is that the court must allow both the parties to have this right, but there is a problem there. Can the court allow a right to one party in a gay marriage and not to party in a heterosexual marriages? फिर जब आप gay marriages में अगर दोनों partners को ये right दे रहे हो तो फिर heterosexual marriages में भी दोनों partners के पास होनी चाहिए. Why only the wives then? So बहुत सारे questions they are rising because of one thing कि अगर we go ahead with the legalization of the same-sex marriages. So इसका definitely effect personal laws पे भी पड़ने वाला है. So center ने argue किया कि personal laws they will inevitably be affected even if court only looks at the Special Marriage Act. उसके बाद भी personal laws पे impact होगा. So last week before the arguments they began, court made it clear कि it will restrict the scope of the challenge only to the secular laws and not to the religious laws. But Solicitor General Tushar Mehta sir said and argued that it might not be possible for the courts to interpret Special Marriage Act in isolation without touching the personal laws. So that is not possible कि आप just in isolation you're considering few things, you're considering changing of the words of husband and wife. So that would not be a meaningful way. And under section 19 of this act, the parties married under the secular law lose their right to family property also, although they will continue to be governed under their personal laws and all other aspects such as divorce, inheritance and adoption. But जो आपकी right to family property है, you lose that under this Special Marriage Act. So ये important चीजें हैं, and this is again a very very important article, but ये topic everyday repeat होता है, but explain section में you know कि सारी चीजें and important चीजें एक जगह होती है, so analysis is very important. So wrestlers in Supreme Court. Now हमारे लिए क्या important है, law क्या बोलता है as far as FIR in sexual harassment cases is concerned, क्योंकि अभी तक FIR फाइल नहीं की गई है. So what is the law on FIR after a sexual harassment complaint जो raise की जाती है? So section 154 of the CRPC, it enables the police to register FIR after information is received about a cognizable offense. So cognizable offense or case is one in which a police officer may make an arrest without a warrant also. So cognizable offenses में पुलिस के पास power है to file an FIR. So जो Indian Penal Code IPC sections pertaining to sexual harassment and sexual assault fall within the category of cognizable offenses. So the sexual offenses cases and sexual harassment cases, they fall within this cognizable offenses category. So definitely police के पास power है to file an FIR. So registration of an FIR, that is the first step towards the probe. So सबसे पहला step is filing FIR. So law also has the provision for the registration of a zero FIR, where even if alleged offense it has not been committed within the jurisdiction of the police station approached, police can file an FIR and transfer it to the police station concerned. So इसको बोलते हैं zero FIR कि अगर आप ऐसे police station को approach कर रहे हो जिसके jurisdiction में case नहीं आते तो still that police station it has to file the FIR, उसको zero FIR बोलते हैं and बाद में you can get it transferred to the relevant police station. So is failure to register an FIR, क्या ये भी एक offense है या नहीं कि आपने FIR ही नहीं file की in such types of cases which are cognizable offenses? So report of the Committee on Amendments to Criminal Law, popularly known as the Justice J.S. Verma Committee, formed in the aftermath of December 16, 2012 Delhi gang rape case के बाद we had this Justice Verma Committee constituted. So उसने recommend किया insertion of a section where if an officer in charge of a police station refuses or without reasonable causes fails to record the information related to a cognizable offense, he shall be punished. So this was the recommendation of the Justice Verma Committee. And based on this recommendation, section 166A, it was inserted also CRPC Act 2013 में as an amendment. And that section says that if a public servant fails to record any information given to him in relation to a cognizable offense, rigorous imprisonment for a term of minimum 6 months and maximum 2 years can be given, and he shall also be liable to paying a fine also. So this is a part of the law कि अगर कोई पुलिस पर्सनल FIR नहीं फाइल करता है after receiving the information, so he has to pay back. So although this includes all the cognizable offenses, यहाँ पे सारे cognizable offenses की बात हो रही है, not just related to the sexual harassment. So the provisions particularly mentions certain sections of the IPC also, including those related to the sexual harassment, rape and gang rape also. So Tuesday ko senior advocate Kapil Sibal representing wrestlers, he mentioned this section while arguing before the Supreme Court also. So it was submitted that the complaints they were given to the Delhi police 21st April ko, but still koi FIR file nahi ki gayi, following which they have approached the court. So Ministry of Home Affairs, it has also issued advisories on mandatory action by the police in cases of crimes against women. But यहाँ तो FIR ही नहीं फाइल की जा रही है. So the complaints they were against the president of the Wrestling Federation of India. It also includes a minor. So what are the FIR provisions under the POCSO Act जब हम minor की बात करते हैं? So POCSO Act, which is Protection of Children from the Sexual Offences Act, it mandates reporting of the sexual offences. So section 21 है of this act, it states कि अगर कोई ऐसा failure होता है to report the offences or failure to record such an offence, that also shall be punished with jail extended to 6 months. So POCSO Act में भी ये चीज mentioned है. So Act, it is making it mandatory for a report to be filed on receiving a complaint, including even from a child. अगर child भी ऐसी कोई complaint लेके जाता है police station में, तो it is mandatory for the police to file an FIR. So क्या होगा अगर पुलिस रिफ्यूज कर देती है to file an FIR? So section 153 CRPC का ये बोल रहा है कि person जो aggrieved person है, अगर police in charge refuse to file an FIR, can send the information to SP. So SP, after verification of that information, discloses the commission of an offence, shall either investigate the case herself or direct for a probe. तो अगर पुलिस इट इज रिफ्यूजिंग टू फाइल एन FIR, तो आप लोग SP तक जा सकते हो. You can raise your complaint there. You can share the information with him or her, एंड देन एसपी के पास दो ऑप्शंस है, या तो इन्वेस्टिगेट द केस ऑन देयर ओन या फिर दे कैन डायरेक्ट फॉर अ प्रोब. सो सुप्रीम कोर्ट आल्सो मेंशन्ड दैट अ रेमेडी अंडर सेक्शन 156 of CRPC, there is one more thing available, कि if a person is aggrieved by the police refusal to file an FIR, a complaint can be made before a magistrate under section 156 also. So the magistrate court can then order registration of a case at the police station. So complaint before the magistrate would be treated as an FIR, and police can then initiate the investigation. So this is also one of the remedies जो available है. Then कि आप directly magistrate को भी approach कर सकते हो, and जो आप information share करोगे that would be considered as an FIR, and then police would have to investigate. So can a preliminary inquiry be conducted before the registration of an FIR or not? So Kapil Sibal Supreme Court में he raised कि law under Lalita Kumari versus Government of UP and others. इसमें the main issue before Supreme Court in this case decided in 2013 was whether the police officer is bound to file an FIR for information received of a cognizable offense, or does the officer have the power to conduct a preliminary inquiry before the FIR. So ये चीज इस केस में already ली जा चुकी है. So इसमें Constitution Bench concluded कि registration of an FIR under Section 154 CRPC is mandatory if information of a cognizable offense is received. So ये Constitution Bench ने upheld किया कि mandatory है to file an FIR अगर आपको कोई information मिलती है regarding a cognizable offense. It is mandatory and binding on the police. So other considerations, they are not relevant at the stage of registration of FIR, such as whether the information is falsely given. So जो ये preliminary inquiry की बात हो रही है before filing the FIR, ये relevant नहीं है preliminary stages पे. पहला काम है FIR file करना. So whether the information is false या whether the information is genuine, whether the information is credible, इसमें जाने की जरूरत नहीं है initially for the police. So court ने भी बोला कि scope of preliminary inquiry, it is not to verify the veracity or otherwise of the information received, but only to ascertain whether the information reveals any cognizable offense or not. So अगर आपको preliminary inquiry भी करनी है, उसमें you will not go into the things कि information genuine है या false है. उसमें आप बस ये चेक कर सकते हो कि information reveals any cognizable offense or not. So it gave an illustrative list of the categories of cases जहाँ पे such an inquiry can be made, and including family disputes में, commercial offenses में, medical negligence, corruption cases, or cases where there is an abnormal delay in reporting the matter. So Supreme Court ने list भी दी है कि जहाँ पे preliminary inquiry की जा सकती है. So court said this inquiry should not exceed 7 days. So time limit भी mentioned है. So ये topic भी again बहुत important है because this is a news. So we are clear with all the important provisions here. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and do hit the subscription button and also the like button for this video if you're finding the videos useful and helpful and you're understanding things. Thank you so much for joining us.